My sister was sent to rehab, and we're trying our best to help her, but when she came out and decides to move in with me, I tried to give her everything she wanted, but she went after my daughter. Hey everyone, I'm 40 female, and I'm in quite the situation right now and could use any advice or kind words that I could simply get. For anonymity's sake, you can call me OP. There's a lot of background information I'll need to share with you all, so this will probably be a long post. For any readers out there who might have trauma related to drug addiction, this might be a hard read for some of you, and I just wanted to let you all know. Before I get into everything, I must tell you about my younger sister, Amy. Amy and I have been close since we were kids, although we've always just had our share of problems, as sisters often tend to do. Being the oldest, and Amy being the youngest, I was always quite protective of Amy, even when we were getting on each other's nerves and getting at each other's throats and, those petty sibling rivalries. If she ever had a bully at school, I was the one who would step in and deal with it. If she needed help with homework or advice with boy trouble at school, I always took time out of the day to lend a helping hand. It was not a big deal. I figured this is what sisters were for. After all, considering the upbringing Amy and I endured growing up, we had to stick together. It often felt like Amy and I were all each other had. Our parents were irresponsible drug addicts, and while my parents eventually turned their lives around and got their crap together, it was not an easy road. We dealt with a traumatic childhood that can only, truly mess with a child's mind. We didn't always know when food would be on the table. We didn't know if the light bill would be paid. Sometimes my parents would be concerned with getting drunk and doing drugs. They would often forget to realize the power company turned off our power, until me and Amy woke them up and told them. Not to mention all the arguments and fighting that often go along with drug addiction amongst couples, and you can see the type of environment in which me and Amy were raised. It wasn't an easy road. Being older than Amy, I had to pick up the slack. Early. I was working a job as young as 14 to help put food on the table. Really. Her parents often could not be counted on for anything. I would buy Amy new clothes for school, and I would help with Christmas and birthday gifts, cook her food, clean her room, and do her laundry. I was aware of how messed up our parents were at a young age, so I assumed the role of Amy's mother, since there was nobody else around to do it. I fell into this role at a young age, and it seemed natural to me then. It seemed like I was doing the right thing, and for years I thought I've done the right thing. Things would soon take a turn for the worse. Towards the ends of my high school years, my parents began to realize that they've screwed things up severely. They both had a bad fight one night after getting blackout drunk, and my father was arrested. It was embarrassing for him and the entire family, but this was the wake-up call he and my mother needed. This was when the two of them promised me and Amy that they would get clean, change their lives around to make it up for being bad parents. My dad and mom stuck to their word and got clean. They've been clean ever since, and I could not be prouder of them than I already am, but that brings us back to my sister Amy. Amy can be friendly, intelligent, charming, sensitive, and overall good. But she's also having some vindictive and negative traits that children who grew up in traumatic, drug-addicted homes often have. I don't blame her one bit for any of this. Any of Amy's outbursts when we were growing up were likely just a reaction to the trauma of growing up with our parents. Children observe bad behavior in their parents and often want to repeat it without even realizing it, simply because it's the only behavior that they know. Because Amy dealt with so much and I wanted to preserve her innocence, since I've already been forced to, quote, grow up a bit too fast since I was the oldest sibling, I would often spoil Amy. I would take her out for ice cream or for her favorite food. When I had extra money, I did everything that I could to make life easier for Amy. But this had an unintended consequence. Amy began to develop a habit of expecting to always get her way. She realized that she could play with my emotions to garner sympathy and would often take advantage of me in situations. But I loved her so much I would often excuse this behavior. We often got along so well, but sometimes it was as if we were mortal enemies. After I graduated high school, I was still living in my parents' house and taking classes at the local community college, since my parents did not have enough money to send me to a big school, and Amy was in high school by this point. She had begun to develop what I thought were simple attitude problems. The normal attitude one can expect from a teenager trying to figure out this confusing world we call home. But my gut told me something wasn't right. Some of Amy's behavior was so confusing and erratic that I began to suspect that this was more than just teenage hormones and high school drama behind her behavioral habits. Meanwhile, I was busy with community college work and helping out around the house that I often wasn't paying as much attention as I should have been. Amy began hanging out with a group of kids who gave me a bad feeling in my stomach. But Amy swore that they were her real friends and that they would never do anything to hurt her. I should have listened to my gut, like they say. I eventually found out when Amy was about 16 years of age that she has begun to experiment with drugs. At first, I was not surprised or bothered by this because many of us might have tried some things in high school, you know. But most of us moved on and weren't affected by it for the rest of our days, and I know I had my wild streak, going to parties and drinking, but it got out of my system at a young age. I realized Amy could not tell herself the word no. Amy's behavior when it came to drugs and alcohol reminded me exactly of how my parents acted before they straightened up their lives and got clean. Well, Amy's grades began to slip and she was skipping school. She was no longer asking me for help with homework or advice with boys because she simply didn't care. I soon found out that Amy wasn't just engaged in basic teenage behavior, and she moved on to harder drugs at a young age. Wow. I confronted her and was met with denial. I was heartbroken that she could not be honest with me, and finally Amy admitted that she's been going out of control with drugs. She broke down to me sobbing, and I hugged her and cried as well. She promised me that she would stop, and I was naive enough at the time to believe it. Today, I'm 40 years old, Amy's 35, and the scene I just described was around 20 years ago, yet not much changed for the time in between. Amy's drug use only escalated, and she would get back on track for a while, get a job, live clean, and then the beast of drug addiction would rear its ugly head yet again. It seemed like any time Amy began to get ahead, finding a straight-laced, responsible boyfriend, landing a decent job, or enrolling in college classes, she would find some way to sabotage herself by relapsing. Many times, she was never entirely quitting drugs at all. She would only temporarily control her addiction to get through a job interview or impress a, quote, normal guy on the first few dates. My parents and I often confronted Amy, and we were always met with resistance and denial, just like the first time I confronted her. But then Amy would admit that she slipped up and that she had a drug problem, and then she would yet again promise to quit and get back on track. She would get on track for a while and relapse yet again. This cycle repeated for years and years until finally I was sick of it. The straw that broke the camel's back for me was when our father passed away. This was horrible for both of us, and even though our father had been a drug addict himself for much of our childhood, he spent the last chunk of his life working hard to make it up to both of us. It always tore him apart that Amy had inherited her drug addictive tendencies from the family, and I know my father always blamed himself because he was the one who introduced my mother to drugs and alcohol. My father even offered to pay for Amy's rehab entirely as she refused and claimed she didn't need it. When our father passed away from a heart attack, we were shocked and suddenly saddened beyond belief. Amy was at least sober at the time of our father's passing, so the last interactions between them were pretty pleasant, but what bothered me was what happened at the funeral. I could tell from the moment Amy walked into the building that she was drunk or high, or possibly both. She was stumbling around, slurring her words, and yes, it was embarrassing. And I found it incredibly disrespectful to our father and the rest of our family who had to witness it. I understand the stress of losing Dad was what caused her to relapse, but I was ashamed to see her in this state of mind at our father's funeral. My mother was, of course, heartbroken by this as well. To lose her husband and the father of her children, and to have the grief made worse by Amy's poor display at the funeral was too much for her to bear. That's when I decided enough was enough. To make a long story short, it was not an easy task, but Mom and I managed to stay an intervention for Amy. We gave her an ultimatum and told Amy that she could either check into rehab on my dime, being forced to find ways to fend for herself instead of having me and my family to fall back on. So, Amy went ahead to make the wise decision to go ahead and go to rehab. After we checked Amy into rehab for a 90-day stay, one of the best clinics in our state, we were all nervous about the results. My daughter Mia, 17, has always been extremely close to Amy, often viewing her as the quote cool aunt, while I'm somewhat lame and disciplinarian. That's how people viewed us growing up as well. Amy was the fun party animal who was the life of the party, while I was typically more withdrawn, bookish, and studious. Amy had Mia's full support, my support, and our mother's support. When Amy finally checked out of rehab, we picked her up from the clinic and she looked great. She had a glow to her skin that I have not seen in years and everything was going great. Mia suggested we let Amy move in. Since she didn't have a place to stay and did not want to burden Mother, I thought it was a great idea, so I agreed. It's been a couple of months since Amy moved back in and she's been doing much better. She has a job and is helping around the house, and we intend to help her get back on her feet as long as it takes. But as I'm writing this post for you all today, because now I'm having a bit of a predicament with my daughter Mia. Basically, I need advice on I'm not sure how to handle what just happened. I was going through Mia's bedroom, straightening things up and cleaning. Mia is very studious, straight-laced young lady, and she has never given me any behavioral problems. This is why I'm so shocked right now as I'm typing this, because Amy and I had such a rough childhood. I've done everything in the power to make sure Mia did not suffer the same situations me and Amy did growing up. The only trauma that I can think of that Mia has suffered is the divorce between me and her dad, and that was years ago. The divorce was amicable, and she still sees her father all the time, and we get along great. So I'm not sure why she would decide to act out now. You see, I found a small baggie of drugs in her bedroom. The reason it shocked me is because these are not the so-called usual drugs you might find in a teenager's bedroom, like marijuana. I just don't want to reveal too much, but it's an expensive powder and not something like a bottle of alcohol or marijuana. My first thought was shock and awe, and now I'm wondering where she got the money. I've already talked to Mia, and she's denying everything. I wasn't sure how exactly to handle this, so I just told her she's grounded for the time being until we can get this sorted out. I want to step in before she ends up developing an addiction, like Amy or my parents, but what bugs me is that Mia is still denying it all and maintaining her innocence. I can't help but feel like she's telling the truth. Maybe it's just wishful thinking on my part, and I'm still trying to punish her for now, but I'm unsure what to do about this. That's why I came to you guys, the internet. I know at least some of you out there have dealt with this same sort of scenario, and I'm just not sure how to proceed. Update number 1. Hey guys, OP here for an update. First, I'd like to thank everybody who left comments and constructive criticism. I got some great advice from good parents who have clearly treaded waters before. So I know I've come to the right place for help. Some of the comments on the last post raised the question of what drugs Amy is a fan of. It was an interesting angle I had not thought of. I guess I so desperately wanted Amy to be clean and straight that I didn't want to entertain the idea that maybe the drugs I found in Mia's closet actually belonged to Amy. After all, Mia is still maintaining her innocence. But once I thought about it, I was perplexed as to how a teenager like Mia, who has never done a drug in her life, could afford a baggie of drugs like this. I decided to take people's advice and ask for Amy's input. So I chose my words carefully because I didn't want it to seem as if I was necessarily accusing her or attacking her. I thought that I was handling the situation quite well. But I immediately felt bad in my stomach based on Amy's reaction. Amy immediately gets very defensive over the mere subject of drugs. I tried to approach the issue delicately, but she acted appalled that I even considered the drugs were hers. She said that obviously I, quote, wasn't keeping an eye on Mia the way that I should be, insinuating my parenting skills were lacking. I was a bit taken back by all this. The conversation ended after some slides back and forth. Once it became apparent that Amy would not budge, She squarely placed the blame on Mia, but I can't help but feel like she's trying to shift the blame away from herself. Guys, what do you all think about this? Because I simply need a bit of help. Update number 2. Hello everyone, OP here for another update. I wish I could say the whole situation's blown over, but it's not the case. I wanted to fill you in on what's happened. So, if you've read this far, you'll know I confronted Amy about the bag of drugs I found. She, of course, denied everything and shifted the blame back to Mia. I decided simply to discuss the matter with Mia again. When we began discussing the issue, she still maintained her innocence and she was looking me in the eyes, and I could tell that she was telling me the truth. Of course, I also got a horrible feeling in my gut, realizing that this must mean Amy might be using drugs again. Mia and I discussed buying secret cameras to hang around the house. Mia and I were often not at home while Amy was at the house due to her irregular work hours. I also told Mia that she should record her interactions with Amy for a while in case anything suspicious goes down. Mia told me that Amy's been acting a bit strange and moody lately, but I've been so busy with work, it's been hard for me to even notice. So, Amy and I usually aren't in the house at the same time, regardless of who's at fault. There was a bag of drugs found in my daughter's closet, and I'm going to get to the bottom of this. Update number 3. Hey everyone, I'm back with another update for you all, and I know a lot of people are asking for this, but I've been busy lately, and I've been quite careful not to arouse Amy's suspicions. I didn't want her to know about what Mia and I had planned, so I've been quite careful with all this. We had a camera installation team come over to the house while Amy was at work, and we placed cameras in important places where we were sure we might catch some evidence. Of course, as I started talking about in my last update, Mia was instructed to record every interaction with Amy for any bizarre indiscretion. Well, much to my dismay, my suspicions have indeed been confirmed. I have to tell you, it was heartbreaking watching all this stuff on the cameras. Amy was not just the one behind the bag of expensive white powder I found in Mia's closet. Amy was using that drug and a host of others. She was sneaky about it, and was certainly taking advantage of all the free time she got in the house when Mia and I weren't there. I witnessed her hiding small stashes of drugs in different spots across the house, including placing another baggie in Mia's closet. I was appalled and shocked by this, but I have to admit I'm not surprised. I'm realizing rehab might not been enough for Amy's problems. I did not think that she would relapse again so soon, though. I'd hoped that she would not relapse at all. I was beginning to wonder if Amy would work at all. She's always been able to easily score drugs from various dealers and lowlifes in the community, namely because Amy's quite attractive, and men will do favors in this situation. I don't even want to know what favors Amy might be doing for them. I'm not even going to try to sound crass, but there's no way Amy can be holding a job while using this amount of drugs that we caught her using on my cameras. But this was truly sending me over the edge. Mia recorded an interaction with Amy, and many of these were relatively innocuous, and some were a tad unpleasant because Amy was still displaying moodiness. But then after some time of Mia spending time with Amy, recording, which wasn't unusual because like I said earlier, Mia and Amy have always been close, the smoking gun was finally revealed. Well, Mia captured an audio recording of Amy slurring her speech and quite obviously high, some drug or possibly a cocktail of different drugs, asking my daughter if she would like to do some drugs herself. I couldn't believe the reckless irresponsibility of this. Why would she try to go after my daughter and her own niece like this? I'm livid and unable to focus, but I'll be back soon with another for you guys once I sort this out. Update number 4. Hey, it's OP back with another update, and I'll get straight to the point because I still can't believe what happened right before my eyes. After my last update, many of you were telling me I needed to suck it up and report Amy to the police. Well, it was a hard phone call to make, but I had to prioritize the well-being of my daughter over Amy's selfish, destructive tendencies. I wish I could tell you all this went down smoothly, but it was quite the opposite. I waited until all of us were home just in case anything got out of hand. I thought Amy might try to weasel her way out of this, considering the police in my town are known to give preferential treatment to beautiful women like Amy. But I had to make the call regardless, and so I did. Mia and I were scared, and we kept Amy in the dark about the call because we knew that she would try to flee if she got wind that the police were on the way for her. When the police came, we presented them with the drugs that we gathered from Amy's various hiding spots, and we also played the audio recording of Amy offering my daughter drugs. They were shocked. When they went to the living room to try to arrest Amy, it became clear that she was under the influence right then and there. Her behavior became wild and erratic, and she got furious. At first, she was denying everything, but once the police told her that they had caught her red-handed, she decided to lash out. When I confronted her, she yelled at me and screamed. She hated me the most, and that I was the reason she had to go to the worst rehab center in the world. Now she wants to get back at me. I was shocked at what she did. In a fit of rage, she struck my daughter, Mia. I lunged at Amy to try to attack her and defend my daughter from her raving, drug-addicted nonsense, but luckily, the police stepped in before I could truly hurt Amy. She looked hurt and betrayed as the police hauled her away, but it was nothing compared to the hurt and betrayal I felt. Final update. Hey guys, this is going to be it. I know it's been a while since I've posted, and I've had many people asking what happened. I finally got the time to wrap it up. I could not post about the matter because the court case with Amy. Yeah, that's right. Charges were pressed. Amy was guilty as sin, and she knew it. She was as sober as I've ever seen her in the courtroom that day, and I know that she'll remember the judge reading the verdict for a long time. It even stung me when I heard it. She was charged with drug possession, child endangerment, and threats, and due to her previous offenses with the law, she did not receive a slap on the wrist. 3 years! 3 hard, long years in the slammer to sit in a cell and reflect on what she's done. Also, she has to come clean and first go to a rehab center. I have to admit it was bittersweet. While I'm glad Amy's out of the house, I can no longer be a bad influence on my daughter. How am I supposed to be happy about this? My daughter lost her aunt, I lost a sister. I can only hope the system truly rehabilitates, because Amy's rehab alone will not help her. Still, I'm happy to be getting on with my life, and I think Mia and my mom are all relieved not to worry about what Amy's up to. Anyways, thank you guys for reading this. I could not have gotten through this without all of your advice. So, the comment section was very mixed up on this one. They were arguing, saying you should not call the cops on her, but a lot of people were saying no, Amy needs to have some sort of repercussion for the way that she acted, and calling the cops was not a bad choice. I want to know which side you guys lie on. Would you have called the cops on Amy for the drugs that were found in the house, knowing that there was a daughter involved that was underage and she shouldn't be mixed up in these things? Or do you think that they should not have called the cops at all? Drop your comments down below, guys. Let's discuss it. My name's Mr. Reddito. Thank you for joining me today. I'll see you tomorrow, and just remember, it's cool to be kind. Peace.